Well, good evening and welcome to our live stream on Saturday evening. It is May 17th, and as soon as I get everything squared away here, we're going to dig right in. So if you have your favorite Bible app or Bible version, grab that up. We're back in Luke chapter 10 tonight. We welcome you to our live stream. And thank you so much for connecting with us. I thought I'd heard of a TV series entitled The Cowboy Way. And a quick search of the internet led me, sure enough, to find it. Billed as a family-friendly reality show that was filmed in Alabama. It highlighted three modern-day cowboys by the name of Bubba Thompson. There's a good Southern name. Bubba Thompson, Cody Harris, and Booger Brown. Definitely a Alabama name. And it focused on how these three cowboys from Alabama went about building their cattle business. The plot of the show was billed as saying it follows the strict code that is passed down from the days of the Old West. Now, I haven't personally seen any of the episodes, so I can't vouch for their portrayal of the cowboy life. But for someone who is residing in Texas and has for the majority of their life, it does seem somewhat suspect that you would feature Alabama men as the model for a cowboy's way of life. I mean, after all, it's the Crimson Tide, not the Dallas Cowboys, that are the featured football team. So what entertainment value did they emphasize, and what characterizations did they choose to feature throughout their 7 seasons? Did they glamorize the daily work or accurately depict the true rigors and difficulties associated with the cattle business? I think it's an injustice and certainly a misrepresentation when the lifestyle of a follower of Christ is billed or presented as trouble-free, carefree, and hassle-free, as a hassle-free existence. Following Christ doesn't eliminate the challenges of the world. However, it does provide the strength and wisdom that a person finds necessary to overcome and persevere. And that's what James, the half-brother of Jesus, wrote. It's there in your sermon guide. The reason we should consider these trials as pure joy, because the testing of our faith ultimately leads to the development of perseverance. The title of tonight's message, is The Helper's Way. Now, whenever I hear talk of someone's way, my mind goes to Proverbs 14:12. Once again, I've outlined that or put that into your sermon guide. The proper rendering of this verse tells us there exists a course of life, a way of life, a course of life which seems upright. But that's not really the truth. What is true is that Satan is our enemy. He's deceptive, and he's seeking to destroy your faith, dampen your enthusiasm, and divert your focus from God. That's why you need God in your heart. Only with him can you endure and persevere. Tonight, as we turn to Luke chapter 10, verse 3, I invite you to investigate what Jesus shares in this verse, which focuses or reveals the what characterizes a harvest helper's way. So Jesus is depicting or mapping out, he's revealing that which characterizes the harvest helper's way. And he begins this verse with the phrase, go your way. Some translations simply say go, but in the original language, it is go your way. It is an imperfect tense, which leads us to understand that each of us are going to go in a different path. It's not that we're following a different directive, but we are going a different path. The ultimate goal and the work that we will put ourselves to do is all the same. It's just not in the same place. And so it's an imperfect tense. Each of us have a field, a place where the harvest is ready. And so it's saying in this phrase, go your way. The main part of this is you need to depart, or as I mentioned before, you need to go. And so the first thing we find as Jesus is depicting or showing what characterizes a harvest helper's way, it is this idea or this concept or this characterization that it entails movement. This isn't referencing random or unrestricted or unregulated activity, rather action which is profitable, pleasing, and productive for the kingdom. You don't need to sit around to hypothesize or theorize. You just need to be energized and obedient. You see, it's about obedience. Movement is about obedience instead of convenience. Now, in our culture, we really bog down when we feel or think that we're going to be inconvenienced, that there's going to be some kind of sacrifice. Oh, my lands, imagine us having to inconvenience ourselves. But when it comes to the kingdom work and being a harvest helper, what Jesus is depicting here, what he is showing is that a harvest helper is characterized by movement, obedience. Apparently, one of our neighbors has a free-range cat that roams the neighborhood. And from time to time, I'll see this kind of golden furred cat sashaying across our yard. And there are moments when my mind kind of dwells on having some fun, and I'll just open up the front door, and we have a glass door, and I'll let the dog peek out, and it doesn't take her but a second to spot that cat. And then, of course, I'll just kind of swing that glass door open, and then the chase is on as my dog Panda goes about escorting this cat off of our property. Oh man, again, it's just just a little bit of fun. Other times, however, I'll just step out and keep the dog in and just yell to the cat, "Get out of here!" And the cat scurries across. People will often be mentally rigid or spiritually resistant when it comes to surrendering their comfort for actual kingdom effort. They live their lives according to the wisdom of Solomon found in Ecclesiastes 3:1, which says there is a time or a season for everything, for every activity under heaven. And while this is true, you still must take into account that there are certain tasks that are a part of our lives that take priority over other activities, things that cannot be postponed. Try to tell a hungry, crying baby to hold on for a few more hours while I finish watching my favorite TV show. Not a chance. When God emphatically says go, he's indicating immediacy, not delay, not let's negotiate this. It's obedience instead of convenience. And so there in Hebrews 4:13, God is clear. He sees everything. Everything is before him. And so we need to be careful that we're not trying to justify our thinking, our way, as if it trumps or counters God's way for our lives. Again, it's all about obedience, movement, not convenience. What we find second of all in this verse is another characterization of the harvest helper's way. It says, again, go your way. We know it's characterized by movement. But the next thing we find Jesus saying is, behold. Now, this is a scriptural way in the New Testament. Jesus uses it quite a bit to simply say, hey, pay attention. You've had a parent get your attention. You've had a teacher get your attention. You've had other people in the community get your attention. Jesus is saying, pay attention. I send you out. And this word behold is an imperative. It's saying, hey, pay attention, because this is a must-do type of thing. And he says, I send out. Now, you'll remember in the recent weeks, we looked at Luke chapter 9, verse 2, where Jesus sent out the disciples, the 12 disciples. We looked in Luke 10, chapter 10, verse 1, where he sent out the 72 by 2. And that, again, is the Greek word being used here. I'm sending you out. I have a mission for you to undertake, but also a mission for which I need you to accomplish. So the harvest helper's way is characterized by firmly engaging in God's mission. God's mission. What you think is it'll suffice, but rather to engage in God's mission. This is when God's kingdom work takes precedence over every other aspect or facet of one's life. Now, in Luke chapter 9, we find that Jesus was saying, if any man would come after me, he needs to deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. And then these interesting words, he says, for whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. He's simply emphasizing to those who are contemplating becoming a follower of his is that, look, you can't go wrong when you sacrifice all else in order to be obedient to God. He has a mission, and that mission field especially, but that mission necessitates your obedience. He goes on, Jesus does, in chapter 9, and says, no one after putting his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. There in your outline, Acts chapter 20, it says, I consider my life worth nothing to me if only I may finish the race and complete the task of the Lord. Now, this is Paul speaking in defense. He's giving his testimony. And again, remember that Paul was well educated. Paul was the epitome of being a Hebrew, well educated, well learned, committed to the law until his Damascus Road experience, when he came into a personal relationship with God. And so he's saying all this other stuff really isn't worth a hill of beans. It's all about me and my personal relationship with Christ. So what we find here in Acts 20, verse 24, is him testifying that we need to engage in God's missions. Now, this is weird thinking and radical living for sure. The world doesn't comprehend it because it's so far outside the realm of their way of life. So let me ask you this. How resolved are you to serve God and glorify? That's accomplished when you firmly engage in God's mission. And that's what Daniel, again, in Daniel chapter 1, where he had been deported by the Babylonians, and he was brought in, the well-educated, and that was their strategy of building their global empire. And so he was being groomed for a position, but he wound up being resolved not to disobey or defile himself according to Hebrew law. He was committed to the mission. So again, if we're looking at what characterizes a harvest helper's way, it's not only by their movement, but by them firmly engaging in God's mission. The harvest helper's way is also characterized by a spiritually distinct motive. What are your motives for the things that you do? In Proverbs 16:2, it says, all man's ways are pure in their own eyes. I mean, everything I do, I can justify. Same as you. We can all say rationally, well, that's why I did this. Doesn't necessarily mean that what we are doing, the motive behind that is pure or godly or holy. People will say, oh, but God understands me. Well, that's true. And then they'll say, well, God knows my heart. That also is true. And then they'll say, well, but God will forgive me. And that also is true. But there are consequences for trying to justify our actions when they're not according to God's will. We have excuses that we lift up, and we believe that God will overlook those, but that is not the case. In case you were ever wondering about motives and what happens when our motives are impure, well, we can ask God, but we're not going to receive from God. We don't have, because our motives are impure. And so if we have incorrect motives, our prayer life is squelched. And how much more does it negatively impact our entire spiritual life? And so Jesus says here, go your way. That's the movement. Behold, I send you out. That's being firmly engaged in his mission. And now he talks about the motive. He says, I'm sending you out as lambs. I'm sending you out in this manner. I'm sending you out as a lamb. The concept of being identified as lambs gives way to both the idea of innocence, how we portray God to the world, but also procreation, how we produce spiritual offspring in the world. Remember, sheep reproduce sheep. That certainly isn't a new concept, but if you take that concept associated with Paul's warning to the church in Corinth, which says, do not be misled, bad company corrupts good character, we begin to realize that our motives, the motivation for what we do, but our motives, our inner motives need to be pure. They need to be right with God. So as lambs, that phrase, as lambs, points to the motive of the harvest workers to represent God in the world. What is as lambs? What does that mean? It points to the fact that we are to represent God in the world. As Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, we are ambassadors we are Christ ambassadors, and so God is going to use us as we go out into the world representing God. Now, second of all, as lambs points to the motive of the harvest helpers to reproduce God in the world. It's not just merely going out into the world. That's not enough. It's one thing to shine your light. It's one thing to show your faith, but it's something entirely different when you speak up and share that faith verbally with other people. So the idea is that not only are we representing God as lambs, representing God in the world, but we are also supposed to reproduce God in the world. And so that's why in the Great Commission, Jesus says to his followers, go to the people, go out there. You need to go to these who are lost. You need to go into the world, not to be of the world, but in the world. And there you are to produce disciples. It reminds me of the football coach that gathers his undersized team in the locker room and gives this incredibly powerful and stimulating motivational speech. And the players, my goodness, they're just pumped up and ready to take on their opponents, and they burst through the door. They're screaming and yelling, and they run up the pathway, and then they go onto the field. And when they get onto the field, they see the size differential between them and these massive other players from the other team, and all that enthusiasm and confidence instantly dissipates from them. Doubt rises and defeat appears imminent. What is it that motivates you? So here's Jesus's next statement to the harvest helpers. Movement, that's what characterizes them. They're firmly engaged in the mission. They are motive. They have the right motives. But then here's what he says: I'm sending you out among wolves. The wolves are out there, and I'm going to send you into their midst, into their territory, into this danger. And you're going, whoa. You remember the Wizard of Oz? Dorothy and her three companions. Hey, we're off to see the wizard. And then at another juncture, these same four people who are on a mission, on a task, they go, lions and tigers and bears. Oh no. And it changes when we're in a safe place and we're not being challenged, we're not being threatened. It's just, well, yeah, I'm all in for God, and I'm going to make a difference. And then we step out into the world and we face opposition, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we're in the midst of wolves. Jesus doesn't disguise the fact that I'm sending you out in innocence. I'm sending you out to produce disciples, but I'm sending you out into this arena of wolves. So the harvest helper is characterized by an absolute confidence in God's means. And what do we mean by that? Well, our enemy uses fear and intimidation to douse the spiritual fires in our souls. Our enemy incorporates trials and difficulties into our daily lives to discourage and dampen our enthusiasm. The lies he promotes and perpetuates become truths as we succumb to his destructive and suggestive point of view. Having an unshakable faith in God and trust in his means to provide your every need, to protect your every day, and to guide your every move is characterized by every harvest helper. They have an absolute confidence in God's means. And so when John was writing there in your sermon guide, as God's children, we have God in our lives, and God who is in our lives is greater than the one who is in the world. God is greater than Satan. God will not be defeated. You know this because the resurrection, he overcame sin and death. Satan has no hold on him. And here's the promise. God says, I will never leave you or forsake you. So trust in him, rely on him, turn to him, and you too can be victorious as an effective harvest worker. The helper's way is to go into the harvest immediately, work in the harvest daily, complete your portion of the harvest task graciously, and trust in the Lord of the harvest wholeheartedly. That's the harvest helper's way. And so while we were privy to a look into the cowboy way, my question for you as we dig into God's word, when you understand the harvest helper's way, what characterizes a true harvest helper? Are you being a harvest helper? Not just mentally, but what you're doing, what you've become in your heart and in your mind, in your actions. The harvest is plentiful. The workers are few. And Jesus is saying here, go. Go out here and make a difference. And to do that, to make a difference in the world, to do that, you have to go in the harvest helper's way. That's my prayer. Take this week. Think about it. Allow God to speak to you. He'll show you. He'll reveal to you areas or places in your life where you need to grow, mature. But apply these truths to your life so that you, when you go out, are making a difference in the world. Thanks again for connecting with us this evening. Look forward to being with you next weekend. Until then, may God bless you, and may God take your life and use it to make a difference in our world.